We're joined live by a panel of guests. First of all, we've got Victor Gao, Chinese lawyer, academic, and professor at Soochow University. Ajay Dua, former secretary of the Indian Commerce and Industry Ministry, and international entrepreneur Dmitry Matseyev. Thanks a lot, gentlemen, all of you, for joining us. First of all, I'd like to start with you, Mr. Gao. The U.S. Treasury Secretary, of course, says China is only hurting itself by restricting its exports of rare earth minerals, as we mentioned earlier in the program. What do you think about that? Is that true?
First of all, the Americans should mind their own businesses rather than interfere in other countries' businesses. Leave China to take care of its own economy and don't interfere in China's economy. China knows what it is doing, and the basic point is very clear. If you hold a gun at China's head, China will hold a gun at your head. If you strike China with tariffs, China will strike you back with tariffs. If you want to sanction China, China will sanction you. That is the tit for tat. And the United States should not expect anything less than this tit for tat retaliation from China. So this is the moment of truth. Let's wait to see who blinks first. Let me tell you, China will never blink first, because this war against China, against mankind, is the wrong war. President Trump initiated this tariff war. China wants to stand up to the moment, to defend its legitimate interest and to defend free trade, not only for the Chinese people, but for mankind as a whole, but ironically also for the fundamental interest of the American people. No one will be served better by this war. This war is completely illogical and completely the wrong war. It is time for President Trump and the US government to stop this trade war. Otherwise, it will accelerate, it will escalate, and China will be ready to strike back if the United States wants to impose more tariffs and sanctions against China.
Well, Ajay Dua, I'd like to get your perspective next on this. The U.S. is threatening to ramp up tariffs up to 100% on China. What do you think about this approach? Is that going to work?
It might work to a degree, because the United States is a big market for the products of China, which is facing its own set of problems arising out of the property boom burst, and the Chinese manufacturing capacity being much more than what the Chinese people can consume themselves. It's not a domestic-driven economy, as we all know. But let's also be very clear that China is a very resilient economy. With the restrictions imposed by the United States when it imposed 30% duty on the Chinese products, China has diversified in the last 3 or 4 months itself, experiencing an 8% plus export increase in the month of September and a 6% in the month of August by concentrating on other markets, Southeast Asia, Latin America, Africa. The question is, China does need the United States, big market, because it's created capacities, and at the same time, China cannot be also expected to leverage its strength in rare earths, the magnets which it produces, and others beyond a point. Yes, for defense, because a lot of these items which can be produced are of dual use. They can go in for defense purposes as well as civilian use. There, the Chinese want to be absolutely sure that the security interest of China doesn't get affected by its own exports. So what has China done? That as of now, if the value of the end product is more than 0.1%, in terms of the rare earths value, the Chinese say that it will require approval, and unlike in the past, it won't be automatic exports wherever the buyers can find it. So I think with both sides having some point or the other, some small point in favor of the US, much larger in favor of the China, it is time that this issue itself gets negotiated first Otherwise, the trade talks in Geneva, elsewhere, which have been lingering on at the official level, are not going to make much of a headway. And I think it will be bad for the global economy. It will be bad for the economies of both the nations.
Well, Dimitri, I'd like to go to you now. I mean, staying on this topic, how likely do you think it is that an all-out trade war between the U.S. and China could take place? And if it does, what kind of consequences could we see for the international economy?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here, guys. And I think that the subject is way more deeper than just a trade war. I think that this is a global transition of power, which never goes easy. So as I see that, China is trying to build bridges while the United States is trying to build walls, because the United States thinks that it is still ahead technologically. Well, I would highly recommend U.S. officials to read the book of Henry Kissinger called On China, where the strategy of China, you could see that historically is based on a Go game, right, or right-see game, while United States is playing chess, if not doing some boxing here. So I think that the outcome of this war, so to say, will be definitely strengthening the Chinese economy. And when you were saying that the purchase power of Chinese people, well, it's huge. It's huge. It's like the population of China is almost 5 times more, and then we're talking India, and then we're talking Russia, and then we're talking Africa, where China is building the bridges right now, while the United States has 350 million people. And when you're looking at the economy right now, it's not in the great shape with all the issues which are going on right now. So I think that China will definitely prevail in that war, but if it starts, which I don't think it will, because it makes no sense for neither party.
Well, Dimitri mentioned there, of course, that the United States is busy building walls while China's busy building bridges. Victor, what do you think about this policy by Washington? Why is the U.S. so dead set on that in the current international economic situation?
Well, for many years, China is always worried if it does not have enough friends. And the Americans seem to be worried that if they do not have enough enemies. We want to be friends with everyone. We want to treat everyone as an equal. And the United States doesn't want to do that. They want to be ruling above others. They want to hold a gun at other people's head. They want to issue ultimatum one after another. Now, the other thing is that China really is building. China builds everything. China started its opening up to the outside world and economic and political reform back in 1948. And China always believes that development is the harder truth. I hope the Americans will also learn from this and try to develop rather than waging war after war in different parts of the world. The wars are very destructive. It's not going to help the Americans. For example, we are no longer in a period of conquest and the rule of the jungle, for example. We should really behave in civilized societies, treating each other as an equal. And if President Trump is serious about bringing back manufacturing jobs to the United States can learn from China better than from any other country, because China has a very solid track record of building up manufacturing capabilities since 1978, and China will be very happy to share its know-how and expertise and transfer some of these manufacturing capacities from China to the United States. But it doesn't seem that the United States is serious about really bringing back manufacturing jobs to the United States. They seem to take great delight in holding a gun at other countries' head and try to call for their complete surrender, for example. Among all the other countries, China will never surrender. China will never give in to maximum pressure from the United States. And China will never yield to any ultimatum from the United States. The United States will serve its own interest better if it can deal with China as an equal. This is the bottom line from China.
All right. Well, I'd like to ask this last question back to you, Dimitri. I mean, I mentioned earlier about the threat from the United States of 100% tariffs on China, but Washington did backtrack on that pretty much immediately after it made that threat. Why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, I think that this is the strategy, or not a strategy, but the tactics of the negotiation of the United States, or I would say personally of Donald Trump. It's called hit and run, you know. So I think that. And what China is very, very good at is actually being very patient and trying to be not reactive but proactive, right? So it always gives some time for the response. So I think that the war will never start, because if you think about the 100% the tariffs on Chinese goods, well, think about how much the prices on the United States market will go up. That is insane. When you're thinking about that, it means that if you're looking from the economical perspective, the prices will double up on every single Chinese product, which is probably 80% of the products in the United States. So who's going to control that inflation? You know what? I think that Soviet Union was really hit by that hyperinflation, and I went through that. Once it's out of control, it's out of control. And American economists, they do know that. So I highly expect that the things will cool down, that the negotiations will take place, and everything will be okay.
Well, it turns out we have enough time for another question, actually. So, Ajay, I'd like to give you the last word about not exactly China. We've been talking about China this whole time. But, of course, the United States seems to be set on having a tariff war with India as well, right? We saw the U.S. targeting India with tariffs meant to stop that country from buying oil from Russia. And the U.S. said that to be India's largest trade partner as of last year. So do you think the U.S. is going to get its way and stop purchases of Russian oil?
I'm not sure at all. But the fact of the matter is, we had started the process of buying from Russia after talking to the United States and during the Biden administration, if you would recall, and we had been, so to say, cleared, and not really the right word, but in the hope that the Russian oil would keep on coming to the international market through the Indian route. The prices will stabilize, and that's what happened. If you recall, Janet Yellen, the then chairperson of the Fed, had clearly said that as long as discounted oil comes into the international market, maybe India goes to India. We did at that point of time talk about refined oil from India going out, but India, the third largest importer of oil at that time, the international market gets helped. So our stand has not really changed much since then. We have let it be known that wherever we get a good price, and when I talk about price, it is including the logistics, India would go for it. If the United States is willing to match the international prices, it has oil, we have somewhat increased their imports from them, because, you know, the oil doesn't have to necessarily come all the way to India. It can be traded en route, etc. The closer to the US, particular certain kinds of crudes. But on the principle, we are going to stand by. That's my anticipation, which has been voiced repeatedly at the various levels, including the highest in India, that Russia has been our friend for a long time. It stood by us in terms of essential commodities whenever we needed, and certainly in our defense preparedness. And that position, I think we are going to stick to.
All right, gentlemen, that's all the time we have for this panel. That was Victor Gao, Chinese lawyer, academic, and professor at Soochow University. Ajay Dua.